Cloudflare Tunnels is an awesome service. If you haven't yet learned how this technology works, I highly suggest digging in and learning how Cloudflare Tunnels can be used to provide external access to internal services and applications, much like a VPN, but without poking any holes in your firewall and without exposing your WAN IP address. It's also free. In order to make your life easier, I have created a comprehensive guide to setting up Cloudflare Tunnels from start to finish. And I'm going to go through everything that you need to know to get started in this video right here. So with that being said, let's dig deep into Cloudflare Tunnels. This month only, all Crosstalk t-shirts are on sale in the Crosstalk store. So head on over and grab yourself one of our Network the Moon shirts or this awesome two-factor authentication shirt that I'm wearing today. If you're not interested in any merch, then make sure to at least hit that subscribe button down below so that you don't miss out on any of our comprehensive video tutorials. Let's say that you were on a road trip and you wanted to be able to access the GUI interface of your NAS device that's sitting in your home office. Now, what are your options, right? So certainly you could poke holes through your firewall that point directly to the NAS, but that's kind of a security risk. You could open up a remote desktop to your PC, and again, you're still kind of poking holes through the firewall. Traditionally, the most secure way to access local LAN services remotely is with VPN, but this can get complicated, right? And you still do usually have to open up ports in your firewall. You also have to set up and maintain a VPN server. I mean, it's a lot. Cloudflare Tunnels works similarly to VPN in that it allows external users to connect to internal resources, but it has a number of advantages over traditional VPN. Instead of external users connecting into a VPN server, with Cloudflare Tunnels, you set up a connector inside your network that connects out to Cloudflare's services. This means that you don't have to poke any holes in your firewall. Now, you're also connecting to a fully qualified domain name, such as nas.mydomain.com, that's going to resolve to a Cloudflare IP address, meaning that you aren't ever exposing your WAN IP to the outside world. And if that wasn't enough, using Cloudflare Tunnels, you can create secure HTTP connections to devices and services that don't provide a secure interface. Now, what am I talking about there? Well, a perfect example is my Synology NAS. When I'm here in my LAN, I connect to my Synology NAS using HTTP on port 5000. But when I configure a connection to my NAS device through Cloudflare Tunnels, that connection becomes an HTTPS connection with a valid certificate running on standard port 443. And because Cloudflare Tunnels maintains an outbound connection to the Cloudflare services, exposing your internal resources to external users even works with internet connections that only hand out CGNet, such as Starlink and T-Mobile Home Internet. This can be used where VPN can't. Now, these are all huge advantages over traditional VPN, and I really want everyone watching this video to learn and understand this technology, because personally, I feel that in the next few years, this type of connection is going to start to overtake VPN as the preferred way of connecting to internal resources. Now, I don't think it's ever going to completely invalidate VPN as a service, but it does have the potential to really put a dent into the amount of VPN servers running today. It's a very cool paradigm shift that you absolutely need to be aware of. And now also, without digging too much into the details of everything that Cloudflare can do, this tutorial is primarily focused on allowing services through Cloudflare Tunnels. I'm not even touching on the fact that Cloudflare can actually replace VPN services for your users and provide full access to your LAN network if you want to run it that way. I mean, maybe I will do another video on how to set that up. If you guys are interested, let me know down in the comments below. Cloudflare has a ton of functionality that I'm not even touching on in this video. Okay, so enough BS. What do you need to get started with Cloudflare Tunnels? You basically need three things. The first thing is a domain name that you can use with Cloudflare. I'm going to be using the domain name crosstalkwireless.com. It's just a domain name that I'm not currently using for anything else. As far as how to get a domain name, there are free domain names available if you want to go out and Google search how to do that. but I personally use Namecheap for my domains, and there's a link in the description below if you want to sign up with them. They have been a super solid domain name provider that I've personally been using for years without issue, and they often have domain names on sale for as low as 99 cents. Second, you're going to need to sign up for a Cloudflare account. Just go to cloudflare.com and click sign up in the upper right hand corner. Super easy to sign up, and it is absolutely free. Finally, we're going to have to create a Cloudflare connector on our LAN. Now, there are many ways to do this, but in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a Cloudflare connector using Docker on a Synology NAS. Now, why Docker on Synology? Well, basically because that's what I have available here in my home office. I have also set up the Cloudflare connector in an Ubuntu virtual machine, and it did work fine. But that's going to be much more resource intensive than Docker. You could also set up your Cloudflare connector on Windows or Mac OS, Debian or Red Hat based Linux, or even a Raspberry Pi, though honestly I would not personally recommend running this on a Pi. Now, why not on a Raspberry Pi? Well, great question. It's because when you run the Cloudflare D services on a Raspberry Pi, all of the Cloudflare configuration has to be done via the command line on that Pi. It's more complicated than using Docker. With Docker, you basically set it and forget it, and then do all of your configuration through Cloudflare's Zero Trust dashboard interface, which in my experience is way easier than managing everything through the command line. In fact, everything that I'm going to show you in this tutorial is GUI based without any command line at all. If that's not your preference, then you can certainly find more ways to skin that cat. But I'm trying to tell you that skinning a cat with a knife is going to be easier than skinning a cat with a spoon. So long story short, this tutorial is going to be using Docker, and I would highly recommend that you also use Docker for the Cloudflare connector. It's super lightweight, and then once it's set up, you really never have to touch it again. So all that being said, let's get started with the setup. Just to reiterate, there is a full step-by-step comprehensive blog post that goes along with this video. If it's easier for you to follow along the blog post with the step-by-step instructions, it's at crosstalksolutions.com/blog. And that's what I'm going to be using myself as we go through these steps. So the first thing we need to do is add our domain to Cloudflare. We're going to let Cloudflare manage all of the DNS settings for our domain. That makes it super easy because when we add new fully qualified domain names, Cloudflare just handles all of that, and we don't even have to worry about it. So go ahead and sign into Cloudflare, or sign up if you don't have an account already. I'm going to go ahead and log in. And here I am at the Cloudflare dashboard. Now, you might not have anything here if this is the first time that you've logged in. I already have a couple of domains added to Cloudflare, but we're going to add a new one right here where it says add a site, or the button might be bigger again if it's the first time you've ever been here. So enter your site name. We're going to use crosstalkwireless.com, and we're going to say add site. Now here is where you could pay for Cloudflare services if you want, but we're going to scroll down because everything that we're doing in this video can be done in the free plan. So we're going to say free and continue. Now it's going to scan existing DNS records for my domain name, which is hosted at namecheap.com. So if I scroll down here, we can see what it found already, or it sort of replicated for us from the Namecheap domain. Now, for instance, we've got this parkingpage.namecheap.com. We don't need that anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. And we also have an A record for crosstalkwireless.com. That's what happens if you go directly to that domain with no host in front of it. I also don't need that, so we're going to go ahead and delete that one as well. And then let's say continue. Now here is where it is telling us that we need to switch our root name servers for the domain that I'm using, which is crosstalkwireless.com. We need to shift those domain root servers over to Cloudflare. So right now, Namecheap is managing the DNS for that domain, right? The root name servers for crosstalkwireless.com are with Namecheap. We need to move them to Cloudflare. And it gives you some instructions for how to do this. Now, if you are not on Namecheap, if you're on a different domain hosting provider like GoDaddy or any of the other, thousands of hosting providers out there, Cloudflare might have different instructions for you, but in general, the settings are going to be fairly similar. You need to find where you set your root name servers for your domain, and you need to change those to the root name servers that Cloudflare is giving you. So we have jade.ns.cloudflare.com and j.ns.cloudflare.com, and you can just copy those right here. In fact, I'm going to copy the first one to my clipboard as we get started. Now over in Namecheap, I have clicked on Manage for this domain, crosstalkwireless.com, and right here we can see name servers. So currently the default is Namecheap Basic DNS, but we're going to set that to custom DNS name servers. Name server 1 is jade.ns.cloudflare.com, and number 2 was j.ns.cloudflare.com. And in the case of Namecheap, we want to just click this button right here to save that information. Okay, so we have saved that info. Let's head back over to Cloudflare now, and we can say done, check name servers. After we do that, we get our quick start guide. Let's go ahead and do that now. This is configure your domain settings to improve security, optimize performance, and get the most from your account. Mostly we're just going to take the defaults here. You can also just say finish later if you want, but it's easy enough just to run through this real quick. So we'll say get started. Automatic HTTPS rewrites is on. That's totally fine. We'll say save. Always use HTTPS. I'm actually going to flip that on because I won't have any HTTP services, or I don't want any HTTP services. We'll say save. We're going to take the defaults for optimized performance, and then we have our summary. We can click finish. So once we're back at this page, DNS takes some time to propagate, right? So it might not switch over to Cloudflare immediately. And when it does detect that your name servers have been switched over to Cloudflare, you'll get an email that tells you, hey, your domain is now available with Cloudflare. Sometimes that could take 5 minutes. Sometimes it could take up to 24 hours. So at this point, just pause, go grab a cup of coffee, come back in a few minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, and see if those name servers have changed. All right, about 10 minutes later, I received this email right here. Congratulations, you have successfully activated crosstalkwireless.com, etc., etc. So we are good to go to continue with the setup. Back at the dashboard of Cloudflare, we can see that I now have 3 active domains, of which one is crosstalkwireless.com. Let's go ahead and click on crosstalkwireless.com. And here we have another confirmation. Great news, Cloudflare is now protecting your site. The next thing that we want to do is tell Cloudflare that we want to create a tunnel. So let's do that. We're going to come down here to traffic in the left-hand menu, and then we're going to click on Cloudflare Tunnel. All of the tunnel stuff, as well as sort of the Cloudflare VPN and access to internal services, as well as the rules for who can access what, is all done in a dashboard called the Zero Trust Dashboard. So let's go ahead and launch that dashboard next. That's where we're going to be doing the bulk of the work with our Cloudflare Tunnel. So here we go, opens up in a new window, and this is the main dashboard. Now I have already cleared everything out of my Cloudflare Zero Trust dashboard, so it should look pretty similar to someone who is setting everything up for the first time. So we want to come over here to Access, and then click on Tunnels. Create your first tunnel. Here we go, we're going to create a tunnel. All right, so name your tunnel. We want to give it something super imaginative and descriptive, such as my tunnel. And then we're going to say Save Tunnel. This is awesome. All right, so this is where Cloudflare is now telling us, okay, choose your environment. Where do you want to install the Cloudflare connector? So remember, the tunnel is just a receiving organism, if you will, right? Now, in our local area network, we need to create a Cloudflare connector that is going to connect out to and authenticate with the tunnel that we just created in Cloudflare. That maintains that open connection so that when we create fully qualified domain names, we're connecting into Cloudflare, and then Cloudflare is proxying that through to our internal LAN. There's a ton of ways that you can create this connector, right? Look right here. Windows, Mac, Debian, Red Hat, Docker. Okay, so I have already personally set up a Cloudflare connector with Ubuntu. So I created an Ubuntu virtual machine on my Synology NAS. That worked perfectly fine, but running a full virtual machine on a Synology NAS just so that I could have that Cloudflare tunnel up and running is a pretty tremendous waste of resources, right? You got to allocate CPU and RAM to that Ubuntu virtual machine when all it's doing is maintaining that tunnel, which is a super lightweight service. So instead, I use Docker. Now watch this, okay? If I go to Windows, Mac, Debian, Red Hat, right? The stuff down below, the instructions for how to install your connector change with whichever one you select. So if you just want to run this on Windows, well, here you can do it right here. It tells you exactly how to do it. Download this thing from GitHub, run this command, and you're good to go, right? So Mac, Debian, Red Hat, here's the Docker command. And this is what we're going to use to create our tunnel, is Docker on my Synology NAS. Now, if you've never used Docker before, it is a nice sort of way to run these types of lightweight applications, right? Because it doesn't require a lot of resources, or I should say it really only requires the amount of resources needed for whatever application you're running, as opposed to, creating a whole virtual machine that needs its own CPU and RAM, and then on top of that, you're adding whatever service. This is cleaner and more lightweight. But when I'm running this on a Synology NAS, I can't exactly just run this command. I have to format it around a little bit in order to work with that Synology NAS. So look at this command, sort of keep this in mind. If you just had Docker running on an Ubuntu server and you're using the CLI, you just have to run this command and it's going to set up that container for you. But again, since I'm not doing that, let's now pop over to my Synology NAS and I will show you how to do it with the Docker application that exists on that NAS. Okay, so here we are in Docker. You can see that I just have a single running container right now. It's running Open Speed Test. Great usage for Docker is Open Speed Test, but that's a different video. All right, so we want to pull down the Cloudflare service, the Cloudflare image that we can then create a Docker container from. So I'm going to click on Registry. This is sort of a library of all the various types of Docker containers that are pre-configured that we can use. And I'm just going to search Cloudflare up here in the upper right. And it's this second one right here, Cloudflare, Cloudflare D. So the name of the service that we're going to run is Cloudflare D. Let's go ahead and click on this and click Download. Now, after we click Download on the Cloudflare in the registry, it's going to ask us what version we want, right? So we're just going to choose latest. That's going to work perfectly fine for our purposes. So now it is downloading that in the background. It's very lightweight. It's about 54 megabytes, I think. So it shouldn't take too long to do that. And there we go. So 56 megabytes actually. And now from here, we can click on this and say launch. And now we go through the launch Docker container wizard. So since this is not going to really be its own server, it's just a service that is holding open a connection to Cloudflare. We can use the same network as the Docker host. It doesn't need to have its own IP address. We'll say next. And now under general settings here, we first want to give it a name. So I'm going to call this Crosstalk Wireless Cloudflare. Then we want to enable auto restart, which means if the NAS gets restarted or if the Docker container crashes for any reason, it will automatically restart and re-maintain that connection out to Cloudflare. Now don't hit next yet. We actually need to come under here to advanced settings, but we need to format that Docker install string first. So if we go back to Cloudflare, remember this was the Docker install string. Let's go ahead and copy that with the little copy button right here. And then I'm just going to pull up Notepad. So here we have Notepad. I am pasting that string into Notepad. And if we take a look at this string, we can see a lot of different things. We can see Docker. That's basically the command that we would be running if we're doing this in the Linux CLI. We're going to run, and then we're running this Docker registry or Docker image right here, Cloudflare, Cloudflare D, and the version is latest. And then we're going to also do a tunnel with no auto update. We're going to run that tunnel, and then we have our authentication token. Now don't worry about this token. I'm not blurring it out because by the time you guys watch this video, I will have completely destroyed this particular tunnel so that you won't be able to connect to it. So what we need to do is format this down a little bit. And so first thing we're going to do is get rid of everything before tunnel. Just select it and hit delete. Now we can also get rid of this no auto update because that is going to be entered for us automatically. You will see that in just a second, so let's delete that as well. So now we just have tunnel, run, and then -- token and our entire token string. So let's grab this whole thing, copy that to the clipboard, and now let's go back to the Synology NAS. So back in the NAS, we can click on Advanced Settings, and then over here under Execution Command, notice that we already have the no auto update. That's why we were able to get rid of it out of the installation string, and we're just going to paste what's in our clipboard, right? That tunnel run dash dash token, and then that big long string of characters, and we're going to say save. Now we can click next. We don't need to add any files or folders, right? So this is just literally just a service that is connecting out to Cloudflare. That's why Docker is the best choice, because it's so lightweight. So with Docker, if I was doing something like a Unify controller, this is where I would want to say, hey, my configuration files are held in this external folder, right? So don't use, when you update Unify, when you update the Unify Docker container, don't touch my configuration that's over here in this separate folder. That's what the files and folders are used for. In this case, though, we don't have any configuration files. The execution string with that token is our configuration. So we can just say next here, verify all of our settings, and say done. And if all goes well, we can come over here to container, and we can see that our container is running and up for 1 minute. Now, if you have started this container and you see a little notice up in the upper right-hand corner that looks like that container is just constantly restarting, then you did something wrong. Okay, you got to go back and redo it. Probably had to do with when you edited that command string, right? So just make sure you did that exactly perfectly. Again, the blog post can help you follow along more closely. So we have Cloudflare Tunnel running, and we're done with the Synology NAS now. We set it, we can forget it, we never have to look at this again because of that auto restart. Anytime even we restart the NAS, it's going to reconnect. So let's go back to Cloudflare, and if we scroll down now, we have our connection information. Okay, so we can see that the connector successfully connected. Let's go ahead and say next. And now is when we can actually create fully qualified domain names that are going to route into into my network through that tunnel. So let's start with a very obvious one, my Synology NAS web interface. If I go to the Synology NAS, we can see I have it running on 192.168.200.11:5000, and that is HTTP, not HTTPS. So over here in Cloudflare, let's create a fully qualified domain name for it. I'm just going to call it NAS. And then for domain, I'm going to select crosstalkwireless.com. So the fully qualified domain name for me to access my Synology NAS is nas.crosstalkwireless.com. So now the service is HTTP, right? Because the Synology NAS internally runs on HTTP. And then we're going to paste in the IP address :5000 because it runs on port 5000. Let's go ahead and say save tunnel. And now we have nas.crosstalkwireless.com as one of the routes that we can use for this tunnel. Let's try it out. All right, so look at that. So we went to nas.crosstalkwireless.com, and it pulled up the login interface for my Synology NAS. How cool is that, right? So just that easy, we now can add internal resources for external users. We're going to get down to how we secure this down in just a moment, but let's take a look at this in a little bit more closely, right? So first of all, it's now HTTPS and not HTTP. So Cloudflare's handling it as a secure HTTPS connection on port 443. Notice that there's no :5000 because it's doing that redirection by virtue of the Cloudflare tunnel, which is like proxying that connection into my LAN. Also notice that we have a valid certificate. Connection is secure, certificate is valid. So they're also giving me a valid SSL certificate as part of this traffic or as part of this connection. So really, really cool. And again, super easy to set up. Let's add some more services. So back in the Zero Trust dashboard, I'm clicking on tunnels again. I'm going to click on my tunnel, and we're going to click on configure, and then let's click on public host name. So we have the one, nas.crosstalkwireless.com. Let's add one for like my Pi-hole, right? So add a public host name. We're going to call this Pi-hole1.crosstalkwireless.com, and my Pi-hole is HTTP 192.168.200.50. No extra port. It just runs on HTTP, port 80. So we're going to save that. And now if I go to Pi-hole 1, oh, it didn't work. Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because Pi-hole 1, you need the /admin in there, right? So now I go to Pi-hole1.crosstalkwireless.com. Notice again, it's HTTPS. We're going to say /admin, and there we go. We have the Pi-hole. All right, let's try another one. How about the interface of my firewall? So I have an Edge Max Edge Router 4, and that runs on 192.168.200.1, but it's HTTPS. So let's copy that, and let's add that to our Cloudflare tunnel. Add public host name. We're going to call this firewall.crosstalkwireless.com, HTTPS this time, and then we're going to put in 192.168.200.1 and save that host name. Now if we click on firewall and then open it up, all right, we got another problem. So why did this happen? Well, let's take a look at our tunnel again. If we configure firewall.crosstalkwireless.com and then open up additional application settings, we can see TLS here, and we can see no TLS verify. Disables TLS verification of the certificate presented by your origin, will allow any certificate from the original to be accepted. That's what we want to turn on here, and then save that setting. Now let's click on firewall again and open it up. And this time we are straight through into my Edge Max firewall on an HTTPS connection with a valid secure certificate. Okay, so one more example. Let's just do this last one here. I have this open speed test server, and if we look at the details of it, we can see that the ports, so speed test, open speed test runs on 3000 or 3001, but Docker maps those ports over to 49158 or 49157. So let's grab 49158, and as we can see, that's HTTP with that port. So let's grab that one, add a new public host name. We'll call this speedtest.crosstalkwireless.com. This is going to be HTTP. And then again, 192.168.200.11, which is the IP address of my NAS, running on port 49158. Let's save that host name, and let's try it out. There we go. So now, from anywhere in the world, I can go to speedtest.crosstalkwireless.com, and I can run a speed test against the open speed test server sitting on the Docker container in my Synology NAS. So I've now connected my phone through my T-Mobile home internet connection, not on the same LAN as this open speed test server, and as you can see, I was able to pull it up. Let's go ahead and run a speed test. And I ended up with 42.6 down and 62.8 up. And the 42.6 down is going to be the maximum upload from my Comcast cable connection, and then the 62 megabits is probably limited by the T-Mobile home internet. But as you can see, you can open up almost any service through Cloudflare Tunnels and have access to it from anywhere in the world. But right now, anyone in the world has access to my services as long as they know the fully qualified domain name. And that is a bad thing. We do not want people to be able to get into my internal services, so let's lock that stuff down. Back in the Zero Trust dashboard, I'm going to come down over here to Settings first. And then I want to click on Authentication. This is where we can set global preferences for applications protected behind access. Now, if this is your first time here, you're not going to have any login methods set up, but that's really what we want to add. As you can see in my own Cloudflare, I have two login methods. I have a one-time PIN, which is basically when I try to connect to one of my services, Cloudflare is going to pop up a page that says, hey, put in your email address, and then we're going to send you a PIN code to authenticate. And of course, only authorized email addresses will ever get that PIN code. I also have set up Google authentication. So I have a full domain that is Google integrated. Anyone with an email address at that domain that successfully authenticates with Google SSO is also allowed access to my internal services if I want. So if you want to add new login methods, you just click Add New, and you can see all of the various options here. You can lock it down with Google, GitHub, Facebook, Azure, etc., etc. You've got all of these different options, and they're full instructions for how to do each one of these in Cloudflare's documentation. So to make things easy, though, let's just do one-time PIN, okay? Because there's no configuration, no extra configuration required to lock it down that way. So once you have one-time PIN enabled, we want to come over here to Applications, which is underneath Access. So start protecting your applications. We're going to say Add an application. And we want to do a self-hosted application. And then the application name, we're just going to call it My Tunnel Lockdown. Doesn't matter. Name can be anything. And then for the subdomain, we're going to say asterisk, okay, because we're going to add a wildcard here for anything at crosstalkwireless.com. Now you can do a couple of these other options down here, application appearance, if you want to put in your own logo or anything like that. I'm going to skip that. And if you come down here to identity providers, by default, it's going to accept all available identity providers. In my case, it's One-Time Pin and Google. I'm going to turn that off though, because I want to deselect Google just for the purposes of this documentation. But understand that you can leave that checked and it will authenticate with whichever login methods you have pre-selected in the Cloudflare settings. Okay, so we'll say next. And now we create our first policy. So I'm going to call this default. And it's a default allow policy. Session duration doesn't matter. And then down here for our rules, we have 3 different types of rules we can add. We can add include rules. So that would be, for instance, include this email, my email at whatever.com. And you can, of course, add multiple of those, my email to at whatever.com. And then we can also add another one if we want. So we can include, say, emails ending in, and then the domain is at, say, crosstalkwireless.com, right? So you can add multiple domains. So if anyone has an email in that particular domain, they will be able to get that one-time PIN code. Now you can also lock it down even further. So for instance, let's add a require. So not only do you have to have one of these emails, but we're also going to require someone to be, geographically in the United States, which is easy enough to get around with, VPN proxies and whatnot, but at least this kind of locks it down a little bit further. If someone doesn't know that they have to be originating from the United States to get through and even see the prompt for the one-time PIN, you're just making it a little bit tougher to get through to your services. And then you can also add excludes if you want. So for instance, if I wanted to block out specific countries or block out specific IP ranges or something like that, you can add all sorts of rules and make this as granular as you like. All right, so let's go ahead and say next. And then on this last page, we're just going to take all the defaults and say add application. So I've got my tunnel lockdown and we have the one policy assigned, which is our default policy. Again, if I go back in here, I can hit configure and then we can make changes to this policy again. So my default policy has 2 include rules and 1 require rule. All right, so let's go back to, for instance, our speed test server. And now if we refresh it, we get a lockdown message, right? So my tunnel lockdown, get a login code emailed to you. So now you can put in a valid email and then click send me a code. Here we can see the email and the code that I received was 566313. It's valid for 10 minutes. So I could say 566313, sign in, and now I'm directed to that open speed test server. So I've locked it down. Now keep in mind also, if it's something like your firewall or your Synology NAS or any interface that requires separate authentication, you're going to have to go through 2 steps of authentication. The first step is authenticating with Cloudflare to allow you to use the service that has been opened up through that tunnel. And then the second authentication is for whichever service you are actually logging into. So like, I'd need to know the username and password for my Synology NAS and the 2-factor authentication if I have that set up. So like Open Speed Test doesn't require authentication, but other services will. So there you have it, a quick and easy setup of Cloudflare Tunnels, and remember that I am just scratching the surface of what Cloudflare can do for you. I highly urge everyone out there to dig in deeper and wrap your brain around this new technology. And for all of those naysayers out there who are saying, well, I would never trust a third-party cloud service with access to my internal network and whatever, you guys still have VPN, so don't even worry about it. All right, so my full step-by-step write-up of Cloudflare Tunnels is linked down in the description below. If you have any questions, comments, or if you want to tell me something super cool that you've been able to do with Cloudflare Tunnels, put that down in the comments. And if you want to keep this party going, I have hand-selected 2 videos on the right here for you to watch next. The top video is my step-by-step complete setup guide for PiVPN, and the bottom video is my recent full review of T-Mobile Home Internet.